A very warm welcome to everybody to this very meaty discussion that we aim to have on the topic Nothing Political About Ram. And I say that, the title is Nothing Political About Ram because there's just been too much politics about Prabhu Ram in a country where he is far more than just being restricted to a cultural icon or Imam-e-Hind as they call him, or a Hindu god. And joining me today, and I'm grateful for all the guests. Sandeep Balakrishna ji needs no introduction and authority on civilization and matters related to it. We have Advaita Kalaji, renowned author, critic, and a media personality, and her commentaries on every topic have always been very intriguing. Thank you, Advaita, for agreeing to speak to us. And then, of course, we have someone who's joining us from across the seas, Anurag Saxena ji. Anurag ji, you've spoken with Right Narrative before as well, and you've been someone who's been outside India but never really left his passion for Indian civilization, and always, asserted the fact that it's never too late to claim your civilization. So, thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll straight jump into the discussion. And so Shilanyas date is almost here. And as I speak, I get goosebumps because this is a moment that all of us have been waiting for. And there have been numerous struggles across centuries. Sandeep ji, first thoughts as the Shilanyas ceremony is about to happen in a couple of days.
First thoughts, where shall I begin? I think it's, first of all, thank you. I'm honored to be with this panel again. And without wasting further time, we'll get to the point. First thoughts, what I can say, we can begin with two well-known prayers to Sri Ramachandra. Ramaya Ramabhadraya Ramachandraya Vedhase Raghunathaya Nathaya Sitaya Pataye Namaha. I don't know, I mean, I'm kind of tongue-tied, given that, like you mentioned, the date is so close by.
Yes.
So the other shloka I'll just give you one pada from it, one line from it. It's called Kujante Rama Rameti Madhuram Madhuraksharam. So this is a tribute actually given to what some people call as the creator of the Rama myth, right? Maharshi Valmiki. How does our tradition regard him? We call him as a Maharshi, we call him as a Rishi, as a saint, as a sage. So did Sri Ramachandra exist in his imagination? Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. What is undeniable is that he has given us an entire civilization.
Yes.
By drawing upon an existing tradition that dated back to hundreds of years before him. So you want to call Ramayana history, you want to call it a myth, you want to call it a mere story, you want to call Rama whether he really existed, he didn't exist. Yes and no, but it transcends all of that. What do you call, how do you begin to describe someone like Sri Rama who defines an entire civilization which is unparalleled? Even to this date. So I see no, there are two things here. There is, if you want to treat this whole Ramayana thing and the Rama tradition and whatever comes in what is known as popular narratives, all these things about dating and, whether X person existed, didn't existed, is really peripheral. There are two things here when we essentially talk about a topic like this, is that there is something called a fact and there is something called a value. Water is a fact. Thirst is a fact. A person who satisfies that the thirsty person by giving water becomes a value. And this fact, this is the reason even why till today, there is this famous proverb that if you don't give water or if you refuse water to a thirsty person, you will be born as a lizard in your next janam. This is civilization, this is value, right? So I'm going to, base my whatever submission using this one. So what is happening or what is going to happen on 5th of August is not just a Shilanyas. It is the reclamation of a glorious civilization for which we had to wait for nearly 500 years. So it's not just a Shilanyas. What does it tell you about the innate civilizational strength of an entire nation and even across the nation, wherever Hindus are, spread across the world, throughout, even in Pakistan during the Rath Yatra movement? Thousands of Hindus were silently praying, even in a hostile country like Pakistan, that ye mandir bane. Why? It is a grand reawakening. It is a civilizational reawakening. So, just to reduce it to some kind of narratives or whatever Sri Ramachandra is a value, as simple as that. And I can put it tangentially, and we'll include both Ramayana and Mahabharata, Sri Rama, Sri Krishna, both. Is that look at all the key points that the leftists attack. Eventually, they can be classified into two broad categories. One is the Ramayana and Mahabharata. You look at any attack. Why? Because they realize instinctively that these are the two epics that have kept Hindu culture alive.
Yeah. Right.
What are the kind of attacks that name calling that they do to Sri Ram or Sri Krishna? They call him a misogynist. They call him regressive. You know the rest of the thing.
Yes.
They call Krishna as someone who has some multiple wives, whatever it is. These are all the attacks meant, done with a specific purpose to destroy the sanctity of these two deities. It is with that express intent. So, what is happening with the Shilanyas and what happened in 1992 as well, throughout the mid 80s to the final climax in 1992, was this reawakening that this is sanctity. This sanctity does not brook intellectual arguments. It is a civilizational movement and it has to be regarded as such. The question of logical reasoning does not arise at all. Now, here is the thing. We all remember, the horrible parliament attacks in 2001, right?
Yes.
Let us, expand that further. What if the attacks had succeeded? What if the Indian parliament had been bombed out of existence? Are you telling me that, going by this leftist secular logic, are you telling me that there will be a movement not to rebuild a parliament? If a democratic, it's just a building, right?
Yeah.
By their logic, Indian parliament is also a building. But is it just a building? It is a symbol. It is a great metaphor. It stands for something which is greater than the nation itself. It brooks no intellectual arguments. So in the same way, now you juxtapose that with the civilizational importance of this. So building a hospital, building some school or college or library or whatever it is, these things do not arise. It is there. It has to be respected for its own sake. As simple as that. I think we can. I'll stop here for now, and
yes,
we'll get into this.
Advaita, first thoughts. Shilanyas is very, very close. You've closely seen and studied the movement. How does it feel to be in these times?
I think it's of course very emotional. I mean, there's no denying that. I remember on the day of the verdict as well, I was on TV when it was announced, and there wasn't a sense of triumphalism. I don't think I necessarily associate this with that kind of triumph. I think for me personally, as a believer, and I don't find any reason to debate or even discuss the historicity of Ram, because for me he's very real, and he's very much even alive even as today. I mean, I grew up in a home where my grandfather used to lie with his eyes closed and do Ram 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 Jap all day, all the time, all his waking hours. So that's what I've grown up seeing, and at that time being amused by him, to now just realizing just how powerful that union that he was towards the trying to achieve. And I went to Ayodhya a couple of years ago, not too long ago. I mean, I went there as a child, and then I went back at about a year and a half ago, and it was extremely traumatic, I would say, because forget the disrepair. Sometimes you get familiar with that in our country, and places that have such hold such value are left ignored. But in this case, having to walk through the barricades, having to
Yes.
walk past armed men and women, and to go through multiple checks,
Yes.
and then to end up in front of a ramshackle tent with Ram Lalla Virajman underneath that, was very heartbreaking. And it
It was.
really disturbed me a lot more than I thought it would, because, of course, I'm familiar. I had read about it, I had heard about it, I had seen images of it. But when you actually see it in person, you kind of, it breaks your heart. So I came away from that very heartbroken, and really wondering why it was taking us so long to reconcile with our past in a way that any civilized nation would do, when these kinds of horrors and devastation and plunder was brought upon them. And the same thing in the West. You have an acknowledgement of that, you have reparation. But in India, you're instantly called communal. So I think, with this rebuilding, really, of the Ram Mandir, there is the centuries of gaslighting that Hindus have had to undergo for identifying in a certain way, for believing in certain things, worshipping idols, for our practices in that worship. The gaslighting, the condescension, the aberration that we were made to feel like by, the Islamic Christian lobby, which even infiltrated our academia, our social commentary, our popular culture, really kind of pushed us on the back foot for centuries, not just decades. So I really feel that it is a full circle in that sense. And in many ways, it is a beginning of the kind of reclamation that should have taken place a long, long time ago.
Yes, very well said that, in other countries you end up having reparations, and here a lot of times you may feel guilty about it. Yes. Uh, Anuragji, coming to you. Uh, Shilanyas, you sitting in Singapore, COVID times, how does it feel? You've been working with murtis, bringing them back to India, and now you have something which is coming back after 500 years.
Well, so I'm ecstatic, and I'll tell you why. There are a few people who always ask me this question: ki, why are you so enthusiastic about bringing back our murtis and heritage that have been taken away from us?
Yes.
And I give them a very simple answer: ki, bhaiya, without these symbols, without these murtis, we are a 70-year-old nation. With these symbols, with these murtis, we are a 10,000-year-old civilization. And I think which is why the symbolism of celebrating, of re-establishing a civilization, people are nothing without what symbolizes them. You see, most of the audience here would have seen Bahubali, right? Now, if you look at Bahubali 1 and the last scene that happens, and this happened in each and every war, whether in India or outside, right? The bunch of villains who are attacking Mahishmati are not trying to kill Bahubali or Bhallaladeva or Kattappa first. Their first objective is to bring down the flag of Mahishmati. Right now, some of these intellectual leftists that Sandeep ji spoke about might stand up and say, "Yaar, what's a flag? It's a 1 meter piece of cloth. Why is the whole army hell bent on bringing that flagpole down?" Why? Because that flag represents Mahishmati. Similarly, whether it is a murti, whether it is a temple like this, or many other objects and monuments, these are very important for India to reclaim as part of its. I'm not a big fan of the lost glory narrative, right? I want to talk about the continuing glory, which was marred by a few centuries of onslaught, right? Now, why is it important for us as a people to reclaim these symbols? For me, it is not about politics. It is not even about religion. right? We are a people that has been going up in battle and losing for centuries, right? Centuries of losing. It was a Portuguese sometime, it was a Mughal sometime, it was a British sometime. Past independence, there are our own people that have been kind of, keeping us in cages, so to speak, right? There is a victim perpetrator construct which exists even post independence. Now, what that happens if this keeps happening to you again and again, it collectively demoralizes you.
Yes.
What India and Indians need now is that victory that remoralizes what we've lost over centuries, which is where I think the Ram Mandir becomes very, very important for us to reclaim our identity and go very proudly and say, because we are proud of who we've always been. We might have lost our energy, we might have lost our enthusiasm, we might have lost our battles temporarily. I mean, in a long history of time, 3-4 centuries doesn't mean much. We might have lost out as a people, but here we are reclaiming it back and very proudly re-establishing our identity with the Ram Mandir as a symbol of that identity. So yeah, so I'm proud, happy, ecstatic, whatever you want to call it.
Great.
Nice.
So, of course, no amount of celebration, I think, is enough. And, everyone's smiling incessantly, and it quite shows how eagerly we're waiting for Shilanyas. Sandeep ji, you've, worked a lot in the geography bit of India's civilization and spoken about the northwest frontiers, south of India, the South Asian region as well. When it comes to Ramayana and Prabhu Ram, there has also been a narrative by the leftist cabal, as you mentioned earlier, which said that, this whole myth about Ram being born in Ayodhya, etc., is a very Valmiki Ramayana phenomena. And it's just one of the versions. And this is something that Romila Thapar went on record to say. Tell us, what is Ram's significance on a pan-India level and the entire geography of Ramayana? How does it spread across the country? And this Shilanyas is actually going to begin the integration of Hindus across the country once again.
Okay, fantastic question, actually, first of all. So before we get to the actual question, I missed out saying in my opening submission that, and I think I discussed with you last time when you met me,
Yes.
is that the bigger tragedy is, not the destruction of the Babri Masjid or the original destruction of the Sri Ram temple or Vishnu Hari temple at the site, but the fact that this became a court case is the bigger tragedy.
Yes.
This
Absolutely.
should have never gone to court. And I will give you a example from recent history. Somnath.
Yes.
Why was there no furor like that which existed over Sri Ram Mandir when compared to Somnath? It's a fairly recent slice of history.
Absolutely.
When was Somnath rebuilt? About 3 or 4 years after independence, right? So why was there no halla gulla about Somnath, right? And that was it still remains one of the most sacred sites of Hindus.
Of course.
I mean, almost every Islamic invader worth his salt has come and destroyed it repeatedly. Still Sardar Patel stood firm, and all of us know what happened. So what changed between 1950 and 1992? Like you said, this whole secular narrative. And now coming to the geography question, there is a beautiful Sanskrit verse which says, show me a place in the world where there is no Sri Ram. Right? And there's a very beautiful folklore also here in Karnataka, actually, which kind of drives home the bhakti tradition towards Sri Ramachandra. Is that there's a word in Kannada called Mara. Mara means tree. So there's a bunch of mischievous people, and I might get the details slightly mixed up, but anyway, it's been in vogue for centuries. So Mara means a tree. So there's a bunch of these rogue elements, who are generally, destroying things. And one wise man comes and he brings them together and he says, look around, what do you see? So they say Mara. What did you say? Say Mara. He says, repeat it, Mara. Let's repeat it, right? Mara, Mara, Mara becomes Rama, Rama, Rama. So then all of them become Ram Bhakts. So almost every geography in India, I'm sure, will have one or multiple such tales about Sri Ramachandra, Bhakti towards Sri Ram.
Yes.
So that is one part of it. So essentially is that, whatever they called as Rama cult or myth or whatever, it's all bogus basically. I mean, that's meant for a different kind of narrative, so let's not bother about that. Now, there are any number of villages and towns named after Rama or any of his brothers or his immediate family, right? Right here in Karnataka itself, I can list at least, minimum 100 names of villages named after Rama. Ramachandrapura, for example,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And if you go to Tamil Nadu, you'll have, Ramachetti Palyam, whatever it is. Andhra especially, what used to be and it still remains one of the greatest hubs of Sri Rama Bhakti tradition.
Yes.
Bhadrachalam, for example, is a
Yes.
grand Rama temple, which locals say that it rivals Ayodhya. And why do they build? And you can find this, magnificent Rama temples across India. And every temple, whoever commissioned the temple originally, will not bother about dates. Invariably, every temple builder, every person who built that Rama temple will have said that, we will build something that nearly equals the Rama temple in Ayodhya, in Saketapuri, which is what Ayodhya is also called, in Saketapuri, if not grander than that. This has been in the Hindu traditional consciousness for centuries. Are you telling me that you can simply deny all this? You can deny something which you can see in front of your own eyes?
No.
Are you telling me that I can see the three of you with my own eyes, but you don't exist somehow? This is what the leftists have done. So, I mean, coming to the, geography thing, I'm sure all of you know that the name for Lahore is derived from Rama's son Lava. And there are any number of Kushapuras, which again from Rama's other son, his twin brother Kusha, right? So, and again, Ayutthaya in, I think in Thailand, if I'm not mistaken. Where does it come? It is a corruption of the word Ayodhya. Ayutthaya. So many of these puppet shows have Ramayana themes. So it is pan-Asia actually, if you look at it that way. The more, I guess, we dig deeper, the more influences of Ramayana you'll find. Even in Spain, there was some kind of a folk tradition about Ramayana. I don't know to what extent it is still being preserved. And a lot of these Roma gypsies, they used to trace their ancestry back to India, and some of them maintain some kind of a annual dancing festival around the fire or something, which has a bit of this Dasharatha and Rama tradition in that. So it is not just pan-India, but yes, across Southeast Asia and Sri Lanka, for example. Why does it still have this Ramayana trial?
Yeah.
What does it tell you about that? I mean, you look anywhere around India, even in the names of people.
Yes. Yes.
Rama, Ramachandra, Ramachandra Dikshitar, Shiva Rama Krishna.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, you take any aspect of life, there is Sri Rama in every Hindu consciousness. So, I think, I hope that answers broadly what you had in your question.
Yes, Anurag, please go ahead. Saying something.
Boss, I'm just going to pick up from where Sandeep ji started because I'm very excited about this.
Sure.
I'm very excited because I grew up very close to the Bhadrachalam temple, so I don't know if it is destiny because of which you took that as an example, right? It is worth going to that temple, not just to see the bhakti, but to see the scale and location of that temple and what meaning it has. You know, the banks of the river and water flows till a particular point at the steps of the temple, etc., etc. There is a lived reality. I'm not saying this is myth and folklore and all this nonsense that people try to use. Right? There is a lived reality for centuries that temple meant, and there similarly there is Chitrakoot, there is this, that, there are hundreds of these kind of symbolic locations, temples, etc. Right? Now, let's pan out from Bharat to other civilizations, right? I mean, You talked of Ayutthaya, right? Airlines are called Garuda. We were in Jogjakarta a couple of years back, and the Prabhanam temple over there has this beautiful Ramayan, which they conduct, I think, every Tuesday and Saturday night. Right? So people sit down almost on the floor. There is a fire. There is minimal illumination or lighting, and you don't need to know the language to understand the story. Right? It is very interesting that, of course, that was because of the Cholas and what they took along with their naval conquests, etc. The point I'm making is the extended Bharat and Southeast Asia is happy to celebrate the Ramayana. But when we celebrate Rama and Ramayana, we are somehow called communal, right? That is a mental block that we need to collectively get over, where we have to say, "Ki nahi, boss, we are not being communal in saying this is my identity," right?
Right.
As as I am a Saxena, you are a Kapoor, Sandeep ji is a Balakrishna, Advaita ji is a. Each of this is part of our identity. Why would you not celebrate your identity when the rest of the world celebrates?
Of course. And so
Yeah, absolutely. Then just to add to the geography bit, which I forgot,
yes,
sorry,
yes.
is that there is this thing called Sthala Purana, meaning,
Yes.
I mean, it is in a very reductionist way. The English equivalent for that is local legend and local folklore or whatever. Sthala Purana is how Indians, Hindus especially, identified the cosmic with their own geographical location, be it a village which consists of just 50 houses. Sthala Purana is how we maintained our cultural and civilizational continuity. That unbroken fabric strand that that existed for thousands of years was maintained through this. Now, even in any of your North Indian villages as well, but I've not traveled there extensively, so my point of reference is only largely 3 or 4 states out here, is that, they'll point, you go to any of these villages, they'll point to a rock or a small hillock, and they'll say that, Sita Ma, she used to dry her clothes here, or that, Ram put his Dhanush here and took rest. So they'll call it some Ramji ka something, right? Ramdevar Betta or something. Betta means hill or hillock. So you will find thousands of such examples.
Yes.
So this whole Rama, worship or tradition, while it is centered in Ayodhya, which is his birthplace, it didn't stay there. It didn't stay there.
Yes.
It was a nucleus, it radiated throughout Southeast Asia. If it didn't have that innate power, that innate nobility, it wouldn't have survived for so long. And now you spoke about different versions of Ramayana. That mischief was created by that horrible fellow A.K. Ramanujan, okay, who had no erudition, who had not read any primary sources either in Sanskrit, and if he had read and still distorted it, then he's a bigger liar and a bigger hypocrite. So the point is that I'll tell you 3,000 Ramayanas, but all these 300 major Ramayanas that he lists in Toxic Essay, and I've read it, all of them invariably pay tributes to Valmiki.
Yes.
Kamban pays tribute to Valmiki, for example. Kamba, Tamil Ramayana, right? Rama is an Aryan god. So what does it make Kamban? He's an Aryan worshipper, therefore he's anti-Tamil. Look at these inconsistencies in logic. He pays obeisance to Ganesha, to Brahma, to Saraswati, then to Valmiki. All of them revere Valmiki as the Adikavi, the first poet.
Yes.
So this is all bogus nonsense, that came in due to leftists, as we all know.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I got a little. Yeah.
So it's always good to have a discussion where discussants have so much to add. Advaita ji, you were, you've grown up in Uttarakhand, if I'm not wrong, and and that's a place which is very close to the birthplace of Sita as well. And when it comes to Ramayana, there are a lot of these, myths that are circulated around saying that, Ram was a misogynist, or Sita was, forced to do things against her will. So it's anti-feminist, etc., etc. What do you have to say to this entire liberal fabric that is trying very hard to present Ramayan not just as a communal, aspect, but also as a very regressive way of life?
That's a great question. I'm going to get to that, but before that, I have to just comment on as well. I mean, Comrade Oli of Nepal thinks Ram is Nepalese. So, I think that goes just out there, like bust the leftist
Yes,
agenda, and
yes,
their own comrade is not only acknowledging that he's real, but that he was Nepalese. And Oli, by the way, is Uttarakhandi because he's Kumauni. So I don't, it's all very complicated, but it was something called Akhand Bharat. So a lot of this stuff moved around. But I always find that very amusing. Because you want to set a certain narrative, you deny his kind of existence because you are leftist and that's your ideology, and then you go ahead and claim him as being from your country and something of pride. So very, very amusing. But coming back to what you were asking about Ram and the whole misogyny, etc., etc. He was an avatar. We know that he was. He came to Earth in sort of a human avatar, and that made him a man. And a lot of our epics, really, why they're so powerful and why they survive to a large extent is because we have even been raised, and we don't go to Sunday school, we don't go to madrasas, we don't go to communal churches or meet each other, but the way we've been raised in our homes itself, in terms of engaging with our faith, has been through storytelling, has been through learning lessons from different stories. So, sure, when we engage with Ram and talk about Sita and their relationship and analyze it and question it based on our own lived experience, our own understanding of life and the world, of course we can. But that's the beauty of the Hindu culture and the faith, that you can do that. So I don't really get defensive about it. I feel that, yes, of course, there is a reason why that happened. And that's for us to discover, to engage with, and to question. I recall a very interesting story. This came from Lakshmi Kelkar, who was the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the sister arm, so to speak, or the women's end, which is the Samiti. And at one point of time, I think Mahatma Gandhi was in, I want to say Wardha, but it was somewhere in Maharashtra. And he used to have these sabhas where people would come in and sit and he would speak to them. And inevitably, there would be bhajans and there would be, it had a religious overtone. In today's time, he would be considered very communal, but that's who he was unapologetically. And someone asked him, a lady stood up and asked him, and she said, you go on about Ram, but look at the way he treated Sita. So how can you continue to, talk about equality, but then in your approach, this is what he does. And he says, what is the Ramayana? He asked her. So she was like, what do you mean? And I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said that Ramayana is basically Sita ne Ram ka nirman kiya, which is very true. The fallibility of a great king, of a man who was Maryada Purushottam and acknowledged as the world, in the world over as Maryada Purushottam and held at such high standards. It was Sita who kind of took him on that journey because she was abducted the way she was. And really, revealed his fallacies in many ways, his faults. And yet, if there was no Sita, there would have been no Ramayana. So I think, it's just the way you look at it. And for me, I find them very hypocritical because you won't question the prophet and his youngest bride, a child bride. You won't discuss that. You won't engage with it at all. I could engage with it and say that there was a certain time when these things did happen, unfortunately.
yes,
But you will not do that because you're too scared, because you know that the reason why you raise these questions is to put down a certain faith, is to crush the spirit of a certain faith, and you do it with that intention, not to engage. And so that's really the reason why they come after Ram. But I think it's facetious. I think the Somnath example is brilliant. I would recommend everybody read K.M. Munshi's Pilgrimage to Freedom. I mean, and at that point of time, Nehru turned around and said that this is Somnath shouldn't happen because this will be Hindu revivalism.
Yeah.
That was his objection. Now, what happened from then to 70 years later now, when we see the same kind of outrage proliferated amongst that same group of Idea of India and leftist ideology, is the codification of Nehru through our education thought, through our education system, through our modern literary tradition, popular cinema, that was codified. So the arguments that you're seeing today really are drawing from the same well. And Somnath is the perfect example to gauge these reactions by.
Yes, Sandeep, please go on.
Yeah, great example. I mean, Advaita, of this whole codification of Nehru. The people, all these Nehru worshippers, they are the real. I mean, if you want to use that word "bhakt" in pejorative, they are the real bhakts. I mean, they wanted to destroy, this idol worship of Rama, but in their cult, the biggest, the last prophet is Nehru. Nobody in that circle dares criticize Prophet Nehru, right? So you look at the levels at which this double standards operate.
Coming back to Anurag ji, for someone who's written in the Washington Post, and then you've had a fairly good exposure of how the international world sees Hindu culture, Hindu traditions, India. And there is this leftist cabal, which is also global in nature, and then there's a certain way that they perceive it. As the Ram Mandir begins, to get constructed, what has been your experience about him? How are we perceived across the globe when we talk about Ram and Ram Mandir? Should we be building colleges and hospitals and libraries there and not a temple?
So you're asking two questions.
Yes.
One is about how are we perceived internationally? What about the so-called leftist cabal?
Yes.
And why can't we build those wonderful hospitals instead?
And that's a question, I think the last bit I'll come to both Sandeep and Advaita on why not a hospital and a library. Yes.
Sure. Now, okay, I have, and this is not the first time I'm putting these views out. So let's start with how would the world react, right? Why do we care how the world would react? We are too large a nation. We are today an assertive nation. We do not have to worry about validation from the rest of the world. Might I even say at an individual level, we don't have to worry about validation from each other. Right. Today, if Sandeep ji and Advaita ji think that I'm a horrible person, how does that change my life or my self-worth in my own eyes? Right. Similarly, if the world were to have an opinion about India, let them have that opinion. We have to go have our people, our self-interest at the forefront and take whatever decisions we take as a society through the democratic process, through the legislative process, through the judicial process, whatever it is. Okay. We should really stop worrying what the world thinks about us, right? So in fact, you started this questioning mentioning Washington Post and there's BBC and Diplomat and all these guys have said great things about me personally. While that feels nice at some level, honestly, I don't care what view they have about me or about India, right? Why? Because मुझे अपनी नजरों में खरा उतरना है, किसी और की नजरों में नहीं. So that's a stand we should take as a nation.
Second, so we should stop seeking validation from.
Absolutely. Validation is for the insecure, right? Boss, there's something missing in you that you want somebody else to come and congratulate you कि आप बहुत महान हैं, right? Why are we seeking that validation? Much less
Sandeep
from
ji, just one small intervention. Sandeep ji, will you write a column if Washington Post invited you?
Me? It depends, yeah. I'm ambivalent.
Right, boss, right. You must write.
At the moment, I'm ambivalent. my reputation will ward them off from inviting me.
No, but if they
But
invited you, would you write? Considering
I
you will
don't
get a
know.
lot of flack from India, you might be
No,
called a
no.
lot of things.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, I'll cross the bridge when I get there.
oh, by the way,
Sure.
just to clarify, Gunja, I have not written for the Washington Post. They have written about me. So before you start brandishing me as somebody who sold his soul off and all those kind of nice rumors that get spread, just clarifying. But coming to the leftist cabal, right? Look, I think the kind of work, especially Sandeep ji has been doing. That work has been, and Sandeep ji is not alone. I mean, there's a David Frawley ji, there's a Subhash Kakti, there's a Vinakshi ji, there's a Makran ji. There is a whole bunch of people that have now just को हिंदी में बोलते हैं
Advaita is
कि
also writing a book, I think, on the RSS, Guruji.
oh, wonderful.
Yes.
So
I'm writing on Dr. Hedgewar,
Yeah.
but the Washington reminds me that I did write to them and said, in the tradition of the free press. By the way, they've written about me as well because of my book, where they kind of said female something break shackles something something. So I've been featured, and then I wrote to them, and this was at the urging of somebody who worked for the Washington Post, and said that they should have more diversity, and they were publishing like all kinds of people, right? So I don't think I'm that badly off, and I've been published in the US and everything, and been written about in their paper. I didn't even hear back. There wasn't even an acknowledgement of mail, because I said, wouldn't you like this perspective? And I outlined the perspective, which I thought that any free press or anyone wanting to carry open opinions would. But I think I faced cancel culture a lot before it became a word. So
yeah, true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So coming back to the
Yes.
other two parts of your questions, Gunjaji, about the leftist cabal, you see, there's a lot of stalwarts before us जिन्होंने लेफ्टिस्टों का भांडा फोड़ कर दिया है. So in my mind, that fact is already established, and somebody that wants to seek information on that fact, it is available now in the public domain. What I would like to see us collectively move from is from talking about the problem statement. Instead of that, we need to move towards the solution statement and then delivering on the solution. So I think what we need to collectively do, and Ram Mandir is just one of the examples, but there are multiple civilizational goals that we need to achieve. For each of those goals, there will be pushback from some other special interest group that does not agree with you. And while we do a great job at articulating the issue, at calling out the outrage, at listing out, at research, वो research से जो results का journey है, we're not able to kind of breach that wall very often. So hopefully, I would like that to happen, and the way the legal process was pursued and ended was, in my mind, a great way of breaching from outrage to outcomes. Right? Outrage has been there for ages. You see, I'm going to take 30 seconds, but I think the example is important. There was this lady, I'm forgetting her name, Nadia Avedia. She was an air hostess with British Airways, and she was wearing her crucifix while serving, passengers. Some of them raised an objection saying that, hey, listen, we are offended by somebody wearing this crucifix. British Airways offered her two options. They said, you either take your crucifix off and go back to a customer facing job, or we'll move you into the back office where you don't have to very visibly portray your religious identity, and we'll maintain your salary and all those kind of things. This lady, Nadia, took this up all the way up to the European Court for Human Rights. And what's important is that this was positioned as a human rights issue, right? Not a fundamental right issue, not a legal right issue, as a human right issue. And the court ruled in her favor. Right? So we need to understand whether the international media has an opinion, whether some leftist or rightist or whoever has an opinion. For us, the right to Ram Mandir is a human right issue. exactly as the right to the crucifix was a human right issue for Nadia. And it is not my view. It is what the international courts have already established, right? So we need to stop worrying about who says what. Finally, here on this whole hospital library argument, look, India is too large a nation. I think it is a because many people on the left have never created any wealth, because they have not had useful jobs, they tend to have very limiting beliefs. They tend to have a depravity mentality, and they tend to think only in terms of very finite resources, right? For a large country like India, why should we have an either or mentality? We should have a hospital, we should have a library, we should have a university, we should have food in everyone's plate. We should always also have a Ram Mandir or a Gurudwara or whichever other Indic faith needs to be celebrated. Right? It's a false, in fact, there's a book which I recommend everyone should read. It's called Crimes Against Logic. Right? It has a full chapter on a false equivalence. When somebody creates out of thin air an either or fallacy that doesn't exist, kind of like what Karl Rove did for George Bush, that you're either with us or against us,
yes,
thereby ignoring a whole bunch of people in the middle who really had no view. Right? But the point I'm making is, when people say that don't build a mandir, please build a hospital, they are thinking in terms of a depravity mentality. They're thinking in terms of either or, which as a nation, as a people, we should absolutely not, we should not even worry about that kind of thing. We should say, boss, mandir bhi banao, hospital bhi banao. Paisa bhi hai, jagah bhi hai. Finally, intent bhi hai. And I think that is what has changed as a nation. कि जो मनशा की कमी थी, वो मनशा वाला गैप अभी फुल.
Right. Advaita, hospital, library, school, or temple? Is it an either or situation? Please unmute yourself. Advaita, I think you've gone on mute.
This was Anurag's idea that I mute myself.
Sorry, apologies.
It was an ambient noise, yeah.
So, I love to follow leftist propaganda because it used to be clever, not anymore. And it
morphosizes.
Cancel that.
Yeah.
It morphs into all kinds of things depending on the facts. So initially, they wanted to, build the structure again,
yes,
which stood before. And, that didn't happen. And while that was their stance, while they had political power and they had control over academia, blah, blah, blah. So they were very unwavering in that. And if anyone as much as spoke about this, and if you didn't toe their line, then you were communal and bigoted, and, you were immediately ostracized from civil society for just even wanting to, take slightly different line. Then subsequently, of course, the wheel of power turns as it does. But if you remember, when the excavation happened, there was actual proof that there was a temple that existed before the structure was, replaced it. Now that we know for a fact, thanks to KK Mohammed, who I must acknowledge as a very brave person who came out, went out on a limb, faced a lot of resistance, but actually wrote about it and made public what he felt. It took him a good decade and a half, I think, before he did that, because you had the eminent historians who Mr. Sandeep loves to talk about. They kind of, quelled those facts, and so then again they were on the self-righteous scientific path of this there was never a temple. Hello, what are you talking about? And of course got busted. So if you notice the spin of this temple shouldn't be there, but there should be a school and a hospital, that has really come about when it became hard to deny that the temple actually existed there, because I really grew up hearing that, there was never a temple there. This was just some crazy Hindus who went nuts.
Yes.
So, that's what you've grown up believing and taught and everything. So the moment there's scientific proof that there's a temple, their goalpost shifts very quickly. It morphs. And suddenly it's about, we should have a school and a hospital and all of those things, because they knew also that the case is not going to go their way.
Yes. Yes.
right? Despite Kapil Sibal's pleas and challenge historicity of the Congress of the Congress also, there
I
was
agree
some,
with you.
of Ram. The Congress challenged the existence of Ram.
Yes.
The Congress's existence is being challenged, but so that happened, and it was very clear that they were going to lose the case. So suddenly you heard about all about temples and hospitals and schools and all of that. So I think this is just them being spoiled sports,
Yes.
and yeah, that's about it really.
In fact, I'll tell you what, as you bring out the court case, I went and I attended the court hearing for all 40 days. And yes, and it was an experience in itself, because Skand Puran would get recited under the Supreme Court dome in the secular country, and it would, like, a lot of people would sit out there, and they couldn't do anything about it. But surprisingly, not one person on the other side, which is the Babri Masjid side, ever came out to say that let's build a mosque, let's build a school or a library. In the courtroom, it was all about masjid and mandir. So, of course, outside they were all about school and hospital. Inside, they never came out with that. Sandeep ji, over to you. Hospital,
Yeah,
temple, library. You have a
yeah.
menu
By the way,
out
I'll
there.
come in. I'll come in after Sandeep ji for 30 seconds. But Sandeep
Okay.
ji,
Sure,
please.
sure.
Yeah, I'll have to kind of grant a lot of large-heartedness to both Anurag and Advaita ji, because they went about making space for this hospital school through proper logical reasoning. But my question is more fundamental. What if the Babri Masjid had not been demolished and it was still standing? Would they
Yes,
be still making the same argument? Would they still
leave
be
it.
making the same argument? In fact, they
Yeah,
would be denying that a temple even existed there, and
of
the
course.
whole status quo would be there. And it is only not even just after demolition. What happened after demolition? They went took it to court, and all the
Yep.
scholarly and ASI excavations, all these things happened. They thought that their political power, which they wielded, and the control over narrative they had, would push this so infinitely, that it would prolong and get dragged so infinitely that with the coming generations, which would get deracinated progressively, the Ram Mandir would not become an issue, right? That Ram Lalla structure would remain like that, unresolved
Yeah.
till eternity. This was their fond hope.
Yes.
But
Yes.
until 1989, no historian across the global community of historians, it was undeniable that Babri Masjid was erected after demolishing an existing Hindu temple. This was
Right.
the consensus across the global scholarly community. In fact, if you check out the old archives of Encyclopedia Britannica, for example, check the entry in 1989. It says that the Babri Masjid was built after demolishing the Hindu temple. What the leftists did, and this is a crime against Hindu civilizational memory, what they did overnight was that they denied that.
Mm-hmm.
Until then, they had not denied that. They denied that because they figured out that there was enough and more material, first-hand
Mm.
evidence of various sorts, literary, epigraphical evidence, inscriptions, whatever it is, that the evidence was against them. So they denied that a temple even existed there, and now they want to build hospitals there. For what joy? Right. So this is leftist perfidy. So I mean, their fond hope. See, this thing would have got solved after the Allahabad High Court judgment, I think in
Yes.
2010,
Yes.
which clearly said, this belongs to Hindus. There's no other way the judgment could have gone.
Of course.
So who are the other parties who put this to, challenge this case in Supreme Court? Asaduddin Owaisi.
Yep.
He was one of the main petitioners as well.
Yes.
And how does the media portray him? They call him secular. He wants to build a hospital. He wants to build a school and library there. So look, this is argument from dishonesty, right?
Yep.
This is not even reasoning, whatever presentation of
Yep.
evidence and everything. Now, what happened? Advaita mentioned Mr. K.K. Mohammed. Two other great archaeologists, I mean, multifaceted, scholars. One was Professor B.B. Lal,
Bibi Lal, yes.
head of ASI, and then the other was
Yes.
Dr. F.P. Gupta.
Yes.
When after the demolition, when they began to dig up, new evidence that actually confirmed the existence of the temple,
Yes.
began tumbling out.
Yes.
Till then, the same leftist cabal said, yes, sir, these are, these are neutral people. They are first-rate scholars. Overnight, Romila Thapar wrote one open letter in Times of India.
Yes.
She slandered him, both of them. She called B.B. Lal a communal historian.
Yes.
The point was that, and I'll tell you why this happened. More than the so-called hardliners in the Muslim community, it is these people.
Yes.
I'm deliberately refraining myself, but it is these people who are responsible for what happened. Is
Right.
that they led up these Muslims community.
Yes.
They were ready to kind of make a
Make
peaceful
peace. Yes.
compromise. These people said, no, this
Yes.
is part of your Islam ka khatre mein hai. This kind of narrative they built up, and they said, you trust us. We know Arjun Singh. We know Rajiv Gandhi. We know somebody. We'll take charge of this. So they led them up to a garden hole, and then look what happened
Yeah.
ever since. So this whole school hospital thing does not, it should not even figure. And just one
Should-
last point to kind of addendum to what great point Anurag made about this whole human rights issue about that air hostess, right? The point is there is a kind of a corollary to that, is that why this has happened, why the Hindus have been kept on the back foot continuously for so long, is that we as a global community, remember we are the third largest religion in the world, right? Over 1 billion people, Hindus are there in the world. So we have failed to draw any red lines that should not be crossed. This is at the root of
So is that a learning also for the road ahead?
it. Is definitely a learn.
It is a
You should
learning.
have some red line which nobody should dare cross.
They
As simple
cross.
as
Yeah. Anuragji, you were saying something?
I just wanted to make this a slightly lighter conversation. I see a lot of leftist bashing going on here. So what I am going to do is refer you to an article, an op-ed that I wrote for the Sunday Guardian, which is called a Communist Manifesto for India's Temples. Right?
Yes.
I'm going to quote 3 lines from there, Gunja, with your permission. Why I think the Ram Mandir Nirvan is primarily a communist principle that we have all effectuated through our action. Right? Karl Marx had said, revolutions are locomotives of history. Indians have finally shown that we are willing to own and deliver on that revolution. Right? Chairman Mao had said, new things always have to experience difficulties and setbacks as they grow.
Sure.
The fight over the last so many centuries was that setback that we as a nation had to overcome. There was no
Yes.
way we would have respected this if it had come easy. And finally, Comrade Lenin had said, sometimes history needs a push.
Yes.
So Shat Naman to all these communist leftist leaders whose principles our community has followed, whose advice has resulted in us winning the battle for the Ram Mandir, and here we are celebrating it today.
what is a Hindi synonym for push, Anurag?
Dhakka.
What was the slogan during Babri Masjid?
Sorry?
What was the
He's
slogan
asked-
during Babri Masjid?
You need to tell me. I live in Singapore. I can't say slogans here.
Ek dhakka aur do.
Ek dhakka aur do.
True.
So it's been a fantastic discussion, and thank you all so much for taking out time. If I can request additional 2 minutes from everyone just to tell what is the road ahead. What do you want to see? What is your wish list now after Ram Mandir? Sandeep ji, we start with you.
Okay, I mean, I think I'll approach this in a little tangential way. What is known as
Sure.
Mr. Mahatma Gandhi, one of his pet, wishes for India was Ram Rajya. But
Yes.
with due respect to his honest, genuine intention, how our tradition regards Ram Rajya is slightly different. And that again comes from how our tradition regards Sri Ramachandra. There's a beautiful
Hmm.
saying that Ramo Vigrahavan Dharmaha, which means Sri Rama is the embodiment of Dharma, and how Valmiki is a king among poets, Sri Ramachandra is a king in the realm of politics, statecraft, and ensuring a harmonious rule, who has no equal. And another beautiful, thing that is said about Sri Rama's rule is that the sight of misery is a great harbinger for auspiciousness. So when you say that, what it means is that, when Rama looked at someone who was suffering, he ensured that it had to be eradicated, no matter if he, as a king, personally paid an enormous price for it. So that is one. And, you know, in the ideal Ramaraja, there are no fetters, there are no boundaries in the relationship between the ruler and the ruled.
Yes.
And where Dharma was in perfect harmony. But more than anything, Ram Raja is an exquisite conception of a beauty of life itself, because it is an attainable goal instead of being a finished product.
Wow.
So it is an ideal worth aspiring for, because when you strive towards the journey, the striving towards attaining that ideal itself is a great process by which you purify yourself. I think
Beautiful.
I'm done.
Beautiful. Anurag ji, wish list after Ram Mandir.
Well, so वो काशी मथुरा बाकी है, वो तो अलग स्टोरी है. But you see, okay, many nations have gone through pain, have gone through misery, have gone through atrocities. Right? India is not the only country. However, there have to be mechanisms to deal with that hurt and then move ahead. Right?
Of course.
South Africa had the Reconciliation Commission. Germany, post the Nazis, had the Nuremberg trials. Israel came up with this whole Holocaust Museum, etc., etc. So you see, no civilization can or has been able to achieve glory. Right? Japan, Germany, Israel, whatever it is. Right? None of them have been able to achieve glory till they have dealt with their bloody, inglorious past. Right? India has never had the fortune to go through that process of acknowledging, yes, there was something wrong that happened. We have finally dealt with it. We have bedded it down. We have given ourselves this gift, like the Germans did with the Nuremberg trials, like the South Africans did with the Reconciliation Commission. India has never had that opportunity to acknowledge that, bed it down, put it behind, and then move ahead. Right?
Sure.
The Ram Mandir is symbolic. It is that moment for us where we're acknowledging कि बस ठीक है, पोर्टुगीज थे, फ्रेंच थे, मुगल्स थे, ब्रिटिश थे, ये था वो था, doesn't matter. But now we are finally dealing with that, reclaiming our civilizational identity, and now we are set to move ahead. And for me, that is what is important. I am so happy that this is happening, simply because we are addressing our hurt and reclaiming it, however metaphorically, however symbolically, but we are reclaiming our pride that was lost that was taken, destroyed, attacked by various barbarians in history. And we are now saying, ki, Bhaiya, chalo, it's time to move ahead as a nation, as a civilization.
Sure. Final word to Advaita. What's your wish list, considering you also writing a detailed account of Dr. Hegdewar, who's also been a proponent of us claiming our civilization? How do you see this going forward?
Well, like I said right in the beginning, I see this as a beginning. I see this as a beginning of reclamation. And I wouldn't only restrict it. In fact, I think it would be very short-sighted and narrow for us to restrict it to places and spaces. I really think it has to be the reclamation of the mind. The mind that has been held hostage under various guards, either under the guards of oppressive foreign rule or brutality, or a certain academia and education system which kind of kept you under that oppression. I think you have to reclaim that mind, not only in the present, but for the future as well. So when it comes to young children, and what do they learn and what do they know about their own culture, their own civilization, I think that reclamation is very important. I think another reclamation that is very important is that of the collective conscience of this nation. And I think that cannot be underscored enough, because I feel that the collective conscience of this nation is emblematic of Ram. And that may be a big statement to make for many people, but for those who understand it, understand completely why I make that statement, because he resonates with everybody, if not in a religious sense, but then in a cultural sense, in the sense of an ideal, in the sense of someone who is a guide in his own way. And I think really, the essence of Bharatvarsh, and those, whatever faith or caste or whatever they may belong to, have draw their ancestry from this land. I think Ram is very much a part of that collective consciousness, and we need to reclaim that. And the building of this Ram Mandir is really the first step in that direction.
Great. So reclaiming the mind, as they say, is something that we espouse for. A Ram Mandir, an ideal that we will continue to strive for, and of course, acknowledge the fact that yes, atrocities have been committed, but we need to move on. Thank you, Sandeep ji, Anurag ji, Adwaita, for joining. It was a pleasure, and really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Adwaita.
Thank you for doing this, Gunjan. This is important what you do.
Thank you so much.